everybody, this is Phil Town.
And this is Danielle Town.
Welcome to the InvestED podcast. We have Nuno back with us today.
We have Nuno back with us.
We're excited to go into machine learning, AI, what's going on with that. And Nuno is an expert in the field. He's an international banking consultant and works all over the world with these kinds of issues. So really glad he's here. He also happens to be married to my daughter, Danielle. So this is a family affair we've got going right now today. So with that,
and let me just say his last name for anybody who's coming to this and didn't listen to the previous episode. If you didn't listen to the previous episode with Nuno, go back, start there. It will be very helpful. Nuno Neves Cordeiro. If you want to reach him, which I forgot to say on the last one, he's best reached on LinkedIn. So go find him. I would
really
LinkedIn.
like you to tell everybody his full name. The full name. Come on,
Nuno.
Nunes.
Oh, yeah, you say it. I do it with a horrible accent.
Can you do it? Let's hear it.
Yeah, you should do it.
You should be able to say your full name, don't you think?
Yeah.
Yes.
Nuno Luís Bates Neves Cordeiro.
Oh, very nice.
It's not good, but it's not bad.
It's not bad at all. I would even say it is good.
Oh, very good. Well, Nunes, we've got you back here. And
wait, but now so everybody who doesn't speak Portuguese can know how bad my accent is. Nuno, you say it.
Okay.
So it's going to sound a little bit different, but it goes like this. It goes, Nuno Luís Bates Neves Cordeiro.
Perfect.
Oh, that's so nice. I would marry you just for the name.
Well, there is time, Phil. There is time.
That is a nice name, man. All right. Are we done playing around? Let's get to it.
Oh, my gosh. We're so serious.
Oh, yeah. We're getting real serious when it comes to something I don't know anything about. It's like, we've talked about Chat GPT and now whatever Google's version of that is, which I've tried using a few times and found that the what do we call it? The hallucinating factor.
Yeah, hallucinations
is so absurd. I mean, it just makes stuff up that look completely legitimate, you know? So Nunes, I don't know, maybe we should start there. I mean, is there going to be anything useful for an investor anytime soon coming out of Chat GPT or Google?
I think so. I think the the way some of these models, these LLMs, these large language models are being used, and it's not just ChatGPT. There are open source models that can be used the same way. Is that a business can come, say a little startup, and coincidentally, I actually talked to one of those rather recently, but can come in and actually fine-tune those models, meaning that they will bring up their own corpus, their own text, and basically calibrate the weights the model has to be more in line or more in tune with that particular corpus. So if we had to bring it to like a real case, let's say you have your own research, all the research reports you go through and you read regularly. You could actually use that corpus of text to fine tune and calibrate those weights in that neural net that these LLMs use, and basically get a more of customized answers to your specific domain. And this is being done, and I think it's actually probably the way to monetize many of these models, given that there are open source models, meaning that they're out there, anyone can use them. So ChatGPT no longer has the sole property of these things, so it's a good way to monetize these models. Basically, having business come in, fine tuning, and then taking them out and using them.
Well, probably the most successful investing group that I've ever heard about is Renaissance. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they have a compounded growth rate in their portfolio of 75% a year now for, I think, well over 2 decades, ballpark. And they are quants. I mean, full on legitimate rocket scientists who are recruited off of the best universities and brought out to Connecticut. There's 300 of these people. They're mostly guys, and they literally do as much quantum, or what's the right word? What's quant stand for?
Quantitative.
Quantitative analysis.
Yeah.
Right. So they do, and what they're trying to figure out is where there's an opportunity to arbitrage something. If the weather's bad in Paris, they find that at a certain time of the year, then the market does a certain kind of thing and they can bet on it. And they're extremely good at it. So I'm going to presume that those guys are way down the road on doing exactly what you're just talking about, running these open models or open source into their models. But does that mean that we could do that? Like could Danielle somehow use open source AI and become a quant, become an investor who does quantitative analysis and trades 4 times a week or 5 times a day, to completely change the model of investing?
Yeah,
I think these are kind of 2 different questions. So,
are they? Okay, split them up. What
are
they?
Let's break it down into a couple of things. So first off, becoming more quant driven as an investor may or may not use LLMs, as in what I don't know a whole lot about Renaissance, but I do know that these guys were doing machine learning when machine learning was not that prevalent out there. So right. They started very early, and right. Back then there were no large language models. So they're quant in a say non-text type of way, right? Probably by now they would have added that unstructured data, which is text, and kind of extracting insights from that. But they certainly started just with numbers. Basically, numbers were the thing. So if we think about becoming a quant investor, just more on the number side, so structured data and less unstructured data, yes, I'd say everyone can become a bit more quant. It doesn't mean to become a quant trader necessarily, but you can become more quant. I think what needs to happen is, a few things. So first off, obviously you need access to data, be it market data, be it company data, just data. And you can probably get a lot of structured data from public sources. I'm sure people that invest would have the regular sources, and those could be very, very useful. Second is you need to set up a problem. What is it I'm trying to solve here? Am I trying to predict how large the company is going to be in 10 years? What is it I'm trying to do with my model? So the model needs to be specified, right? And then probably based on those specifications, you might need to go back to your data and kind of find different sources, fine tune it, just making sure that you have what you need to operate that model. Third is, okay, now you've articulated your AI or your ML problem, you have the data available. So now it's all about actually training the algorithm that will make those predictions, right? Will the company grow and by how much in 10 years' time? And this is where there are now, I suppose, some platforms that allow, let's say, non-data scientist people to actually go and use machine learning. So what they do is it's actually rather interesting. So it's almost like a new field called auto ML.
Cool.
Yeah. And so they create fundamentally, it's a piece of software, obviously, not obviously, but it's a piece of software. And what it does is it leaves all the coding in the background. So basically you define, which, input variables or descriptive features you're going to be using. What is it you're trying to predict? If it's a prediction case, as we were laying it out, and then the platform itself will train different types of algorithms, and will actually let you know which one of those is the more suitable one as far as performance goes. And you can define which performance criteria you're actually using. But it will tell you which one is best. So there's zero code involved in this, zero. Because you have that platform basically doing all the coding in the background for you.
Do you know what some of those are called, if somebody wants to look them up?
Well, there's one here in Switzerland, which is called modulus.ai. Modulus.
And is that something that only businesses would use, or individuals could use as well?
I think last time I spoke to them, they were more of a B2B type of business. But there's absolutely no reason, because even in a business, right, there's people are using this, right? So there would be no reasons to not be B2C eventually. No.
Yeah, I just mean in terms of cost and accessibility.
Well, it sort of makes me wonder if what do you think about this? Is there some kind of metaphor or relationship between the history of, let's say, movie making and the development of tools? If we go back right to the 1900s, when movies started first being made, they were being made by very few people, and then it started being made by studios, and individual people didn't make their own movies. And then they had this 8mm movie that you could do at home, and then videos you could do at home, and then now you can do it on your computer. And your computer will make a nice little home movie for you out of still photos that you've got, right? That's a huge evolution, right?
Yeah.
Is that possible that that's where we're going here for somehow in the investing field? Like right now we got Renaissance let's say they're the pinnacle of successful investors who are using massive amount of data, and somehow we will be building machines, if you will, that will ultimately let a little guy like me or Danielle do the same thing somehow. Like if I have a clever idea, I've got the tools there to turn it into an investment.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that's exactly. I think it's all about democratizing access to certain technologies.
Good word for it. Yeah.
Right. I mean, take the computer, which, like AI, by the way, is as much of a general purpose technology, meaning you can use it for a variety of purposes, right? And yeah, it started being something that only corporations had. They took like big rooms with elevated floors for all the cabling to go under. They were cooled, they were really cold, those rooms back in the day. But obviously they were not meant to be in anyone's home. And then here we are today. Everyone has their own laptop, or most people would anyway. So yeah, I think it's democratizing a technology. I think in this case, because the technology is, let's say it's a statistical and rather complex at times, what democratizing means is a little bit different. It's not a piece of hardware, it's a piece of software. But yeah, it's all about making it simple enough that regular people can actually use it. Yeah.
And it's like hard to see it. I don't know if you remember this, Danielle and Nunes, but I may have told you the story of me being back in the 80s with Steve Jobs over at Next Computer, going through a process of putting software on that computer on a company I was funding. And I was able to sit in on a meeting of Steve and his top team where he started to describe what it will be like in the future to do editing of video, of digital
cool
stuff. And this was 1988. And he was describing tools that didn't exist yet. I mean, I think they existed over at Pixar, which is how he sort of got into the field. He had invested in Pixar, I think, that year, roughly, and was coming up to speed himself on what was possible to do with a computer, and seeing that it would be brought to the masses, as you say, democratized. It's a sort of inevitability. And what he said was, the ability to edit a document on a computer is something we take for granted now, but back in the late 80s, it was still pretty magnificent at that point. It was kind of like, holy crap, you can put a picture into a document. This is unbelievable.
Yeah, magical.
It's magical. You can do your own publishing. You could do your own newsletter.
Yeah.
You could do your own newspaper. I mean, when I was in high school, doing a high school newspaper meant going to a printing house with a bunch of typed out stuff, and then they would typeset it into these columns and then send it and give it back to you in sticky paper. And you'd peel the back off the sticky paper and paste it to a graphics board, get all your columns right, and then they put that back to the printer and they would run that thing, and that'd be your newspaper for the week.
Yeah.
And I mean, that is just so archaic. I mean, you can't even imagine that that's what you had to do.
Well, it's so extraordinary also that you're saying in 88, Steve Jobs is telling you about a technology that he only knows through Pixar. By 95, we had editing software in our house. So that's, 94, 95, roughly.
Exactly.
We had Adobe Premiere and some massive hard drives.
Well, at that same time.
And so that's what, 7 years, let's say.
For sure.
Which is incredibly fast. And yet now technology is moving so much faster. So I think my question for Nuno is, how do we as individuals, and this goes to your question, Dad, how do we as individuals sitting in our living rooms who are not heads of large organizations, who can't necessarily contract individually with a specialist company in Switzerland, is there a way that we can start to access this sort of technology?
Well, it will be a little bit harder without those auto ML type of platforms.
Okay. Well, yeah. But with auto ML, I mean.
Oh, I thought you meant without having access to auto ML. No, yeah, absolutely. Because so here's the beauty of what you described, Phil, and what these platforms can do for democratization of AI, is that a lot of the value actually that you extract from AI in particular starts with, well, some level of creativity, meaning here's a problem that I will solve or try to solve through data, right? And that there, the translation of what is say a business problem or investing problem, translating that onto an AI problem, and they have different articulations. They will, if you write them down, they will sound a little bit different. But that right there, the creativity that needs to happen, right, to unlock the potential of AI is absolutely critical. And without that, we'll be solving relatively obvious problems. But it's really, tapping or allowing people to, use their creativity and then not worry too much about the execution, because the execution becomes just a technical set of steps that some platform will take care rather than you coding.
I feel like a very old guy asking a question like this, but I mean, would it be like this? Let's say that I'm looking at Tyson Foods. Okay. So Tyson, one of the largest meat producers, protein producers in the world. And I want to know first if Tyson will be a much larger company, unspecified larger, but larger in 10 years, number one. And number two, what are they worth? And what I have available, let's say down in the future, what I have available are these little pods of data that I could sort of order up, right, with a click. So I would order up all the Tyson data, go back, every annual report it ever produced, every quarterly report it ever produced, every proxy, every letter the CEO wrote, every transcript from every earnings report, every quarter back 50 years, okay, or however far back it's got. All right, and that's a button click. Click, it's all there. And then I also want the same thing on every one of their major competitors that's public and everyone that's private that I know of that we can get data for. Click, like that. And now go tell me what you can tell me. Is that something is that what we're talking about here?
Yeah, that is quite doable. Let me give you a couple of examples actually from my professional life. So they're not necessarily investing related, but they do exactly. It's right. They describe the process. I'd like to relay back. So let's say that so my client is a private bank. They're working on developing a proposition for a specific segment. Let's leave the segment out. Now, and the question is very simple. How is the behavior of this particular segment different from others? And once we understand that, is understanding whether those differences are of a large enough magnitude and in areas that the proposition can actually adjust and calibrate and be tailored to. So how do you approach this? So you take all that, and this is equivalent to all your data about the company. So you take all the behavioral data you can find about that segment and every other segment that a particular bank is focused on. Then you create a predictive model, right, to basically predict what segment are we talking about. Now, it sounds silly because we know which client belongs to which segment, right? But here's what we are doing. We are using a predictive model to isolate which of those behaviors carry the highest discriminatory signal in terms of being able to identify which segment this is. So basically, which behaviors are a bit more unique to that segment as opposed to all the others. And then we use that information, right? So now we know that it's behavior A, B, and C. Now we can focus on those three behaviors in particular, and then customize the proposition to be sure to be tailored, right, to address the needs that those behaviors underlie. So in your example, right, this would be the equivalent of you take all that data, you understand which, because not all will be relevant as far as understanding growth, right, or forecasting growth. So you look back to past growth, right, so how the company has grown before, and you just zero in and you understand which of those, from all that data, which are the main levers that actually explain or can help explain that growth the most. And those are the subset that you will be looking to forecast to then understand what is, based on the past effect that these levers have had as far as growth goes in the past, what is the, based on my forecast, right, or your forecast, what is the expected growth that I can get or this company is likely to achieve in the future. And of course, you don't just do that for that company. As you mentioned, you will have all the competitors, because somebody's success is not a standalone thing. If the competitors do a little bit worse, then if I do the right things, I'll get my growth. But even if I do the right things and others do it better, then I get no growth at all. So you do the same for everyone else, and then you create this constellation of future growth on any given sector. Obviously, we're talking about companies that would be competing with each other. So that's one way. And this is all quite doable, as far as without code.
Yeah. And you've got, there's an enormous amount of data that let's say as this revolution goes along, rather than just language being poured into one of these AI machines, it has all this numerical data, which is the language of business. Right now, it doesn't look like they're very good at numerical data, understanding what that means relative to trying to figure out what the next word is that you should put into a sentence, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't really know how much better AI will be at the numbers.
It's much better. It's much more developed. Yeah. It's much more mature as far as, so the progression is usually, you tend to start using internal structured data. So this is stuff you have yourself or have gathered, maybe from some public sources. And what I mean by structured, it's usually numerical or categorical, could be, but it's you know what each piece of data is. You know exactly what it represents. You know all this. Unstructured is text, for instance. There's a lot of information hidden in text, but you need to go and find it. You don't know exactly where everything is. So let's say using text to.
So you'd say that doing the numbers is easier for AI than doing language?
Yeah. Language is a bit more complicated than using algorithms that work with numbers or categorical.
So thinking about this really naively, I would think it's the other way around in a weird way. And that is that language has structure to it. Like there's a structure to a sentence. And if you've got a ton of sentences, you can sort of learn what that structure could be and then start putting the correct word in next into that structure. But what's the structure of a number? I mean, it's like numbers, they don't have a necessary number that follows some other number.
Well, I would say the structure is not so much on the number itself, but on the data set you use. So a concrete example. Let's say you're trying to predict GDP growth based on certain macro variables, macro features you use. I don't know, population growth, savings rates, productivity of that particular country, linked to productivity, like the education level. I mean, you name it. You can be a big dump of macro data. Now, what I mean by structured is that you have this huge data set of all these descriptive features, and you know what each one of them is. So you know exactly in time. Let's say it's a time series, right? You know exactly how saving rate has evolved in time. You know exactly how foreign direct investment has evolved in time. So you have all that information, and its structure is there, and then you can basically use these algorithms to basically zero in on what are those descriptive features that actually carry the most predictive power in terms of GDP.
So rather than predicting that the next word is train, you're predicting the next number.
Next number, yes. I'm predicting.
It'd be very valuable to know that next number, right?
Yeah, super valuable. Yeah. I mean,
okay.
There's a whole field, right? There's a whole field, and I'm an economist by training, so there's a whole field of econometrics, which is all about, based on certain inputs, predict what is it, what should we expect, demand, supply, price levels, inflation, etc. That will happen in the economy. It's very useful.
I'm just turning around to look for some books, and I don't know where.
Well, he looks for books.
Oh, here it is.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I don't know if you've read this or not. Chaos Kings.
No.
It's been out for quite a while, like 10 years or something. It's an old book, and I got onto it because I'm fascinated by Nicholas Taleb and Mark Spitznagel's success at being able to insure against market crashes using put options. And I thought, and this book's about those guys, basically going out to try to tame chaos, right? And being able to make great returns when all of a sudden you have a big black swan event happen. And there's a scientist in France who, I'll try to find his name right now, who believed that he'd come up with a way to see that the turbulence would start up we're talking in the markets here, turbulence would start up in a way he could see it numerically before the black swan happened. And he really truly believed he had, this is as of 2013, that he had the answer, and yet had not been able to really benefit from the 2007, 2008 crash. Didn't really call it, called it a little bit, but didn't really call it. Whereas Spitznagel and Taleb nailed it and just made billions and billions of dollars. And the point I'm trying to ask you about is this. Taleb and Spitznagel think there is no way on earth that you can predict some major dislocation in the market. You can't do it. And that thinking that you can do it has been the result of a lot of hedge funds exploding that are leveraged up. So will AI, do you think AI has a shot at actually changing Taleb's mind about something like that?
It is possible. And the reason why I think it's possible, and I have no idea what their approach was. I don't know if it involved AI or not, but
their approach was really simple. Just keep buying puts all the time. In other words, their approach is literally car insurance. You don't know when you're going to crash. You may never crash, but you better have car insurance all the time. And that's what they do. They provide that insurance policy. That's
it's a blanket strategy. It's not really
strategy.
Yeah.
Not trying to guess at all.
Yeah.
And being wrong 95% of the time.
Yeah. So I think that in that particular instance, I think AI could feasibly help for two reasons. One is dimensionality, and the other one has to do with sort of the type of function it creates. What I mean by dimensionality.
What is it again? That word?
Dimensionality and
dimensionality. Okay.
Dimensionality, yeah. And what I mean by dimensionality is that when we're trying to understand the levers of, in this case, a market index, I suppose, or no, I don't know exactly what they were.
And let's say the market index. Yeah.
An index, yeah. So we're trying to predict that index. And that's what is called like a target feature, right? That's what the outcome we're trying to predict. Now, to predict that, we will use, and this is back to the stuff we were discussing before, we use copious amounts of data, and let's call those our descriptive features, right? Now, the number of descriptive features you can put in is, I mean, it's not infinite because there's something called the curse of dimensionality. We don't need to get to that, but it can be very, very large, meaning that you can be using relevant levers in a large enough number that you start extracting meaning from what would be an otherwise incomplete modeling of that particular target feature, like that we're trying to predict. So it allows it really is a little bit agnostic, provided you have a deep enough data set, but it's a little bit agnostic to how many descriptive features you end up using. And because of that, you can actually use more, rather more than less. The second reason why it could be quite powerful also is because of the nature of the function that is established between those descriptive features and the target feature, right? So, I mean, I mentioned, econometrics earlier. Econometrics is a way of describing, the behavior of economic agents in isolation and as an aggregate, but through equations, through parametric functions. That's what an equation is. Like there's a finite, set of parameters. Now, machine learning, and depending on the algorithm, but it really creates a function that establishes that relationship between the descriptive feature and the target feature, but creates a function that is non-parametric, and that is incredibly powerful because that relationship can be described in just about, if it's a neural network through a mechanism of weightings and activation nodes, activation functions on the nodes. If it's a random forest, it's about a hierarchical relationship between those descriptive features in a sort of Bayesian type of logic. Anyway, it's just, sorry, I'm being a little bit obscure here with all these technicalities.
I've actually read some of those words before.
Okay.
I really understood. I think the Bayesian. I got on the Bayesian. That was good.
Yeah. So the words don't really matter. The point is that because you move away from describing a relationship based on an equation, you gain a lot of power by doing so, and that's one of the beauties actually of some of these machine learning algorithms. Actually, you can really move away from that linearity or quasi-linearity that usually comes with these parametric models. So yeah, it's feasible to think that because you bring in more levers, right, that can explain that particular index, the behavior of a particular index, and because you describe the relationship between those levers and the index itself in a different way, that you can extract some meaningful predictions or understanding of what drives.
Like we were talking before, doesn't that depend on the humans defining those parameters?
Yeah,
I was going to say but not necessarily differently.
Yeah,
Better.
Absolutely, 100%. And this is where the creativity I mentioned earlier comes in. Let me give you an example. And again, it's from my professional background, but I was in the context of this project of Salesforce effectiveness, which was all about helping relationship managers for a private bank do better work. And one of the pain points that was identified was client retention. So basically, they were not being good enough at retaining clients, even if they were good at everything else, which they weren't. But that's not the point. Now, it was decided that, let's develop a client attrition algorithm, meaning an algorithm that will predict the likelihood of each individual client living in the bank in 3 months' time. So you want to predict early enough, right, that there's still some goodwill, that if you call the client and kind of talk things through, you can still,
they still might like you a little
exactly.
bit.
There's some lingering goodwill is still there. So okay, very long story, but the point is that into that particular algorithm, 47%, let's run it up, like half of the predictive power that went into the algorithm came from descriptive features that were engineered, meaning it is not data you just get from systems or external sources or whatever. These are features you actually create yourself. You engineer them, and this requires some creativity, because you need to imagine. Oh, so wait, I'm looking at a behavior. Let's say a trading behavior is one of the relevant ones. But how am I describing this behavior in time, such that the algorithm actually extracts some meaning out of this, right? And you can say, okay, what was the average trading in the observation period you have there? But you could also, and this is where the creativity comes in, ask and answer. So is there a trend in that behavior, positive and negative? What is the slope? If the trend is there, is it a monotonic trend, meaning does it go up all the time or down all the time? What is the noise or variance around that trend? Because you can get a trend just because randomly somebody went up and down, etc., and you still get a trend, but it's not really human, purposely kind of caused. Whereas if you have a low variance around that trend, then you can actually infer a bit more intention, right, in terms of driving a certain behavior up or down. Again, I'm getting too technical.
Point being, we could potentially see that trend. If I've got this right, we could potentially see that trend as a result of the enormous amount of data that we can pour in, which we can use our skill set to determine which data goes in there.
Yeah.
And then manipulate it.
Manipulate it, exactly. That's the engineering part. But that takes creativity, right? It's not something that just comes off the shelf like that. You need to work with it. Right. So yeah, to your question, Danielle, absolutely. Creativity is absolutely key in making these models more accurate and more usable.
I just think that's the part that gets missed a lot in people who are trying to understand it and don't know a lot about it, that they just think like, oh, you put all this data in and the computer does magical things and then it comes out and predicts whether or not the market's going to crash. But it's because humans set up the descriptive feed. No, we want to know that. But what I'm saying is the way that you get there is not the computer magically does it. It's the humans have set up the descriptive features, maybe in a way nobody's ever done it. And that's how they get results that nobody's ever achieved.
Exactly.
So it's very like beautiful in a way and scientific and artistic. And I think it's very cool.
But this is where we talked about earlier, kind of tapping on all that creativity while at the same time making the process of developing the algorithms irrelevant, right? Because everyone in a business context or investing context, it doesn't really matter. They're one and the same actually, but or could be one and the same. The point is, we all as humans in our professional activities or personal activities, we all feel pain points, right? Now, we don't need to be computer scientists to use our creativity to think about how can we solve these pain points through the use of data and AI, and then just leave the coding aspect to a platform, or if you can hire somebody, great, but to somebody that actually knows that. But without enabling people, like common people like us, right, to not care about the implementation aspect of machine learning, then people have little incentive to think about how would I solve this pain point through the use of data, and end up not really tapping on that creativity. So yeah, it's just the democratization of ML. I think it's like an incredibly powerful thing to happen, because it will allow everyone to actually think about their pain points in a little bit, in a slightly different fashion, and probably solving them in a more effective way.
Is there somewhere that I can go now? Like, what do I type into Google or my,
and then we've got
browser?
We got to go.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we can stop now, and I can ask this yet again. Or maybe you can just tell me the answer. What do I type in?
I'm typing it right now. So I just wrote AutoML platform.
Because I know even Google has like a basic AI ML
Google
thing that you can use, which I've tried to use and is, I don't know, didn't seem that useful.
Want to be really sneaky and force everybody to go over to the website and get this information? Because I think reading this out isn't going to be really useful while people are driving to work.
Yeah, if you don't have a go-to, then I would say that it just doesn't exist at this point.
Or let's noodle that around with Nuno later, and maybe we can put it up on the website if there is something. But I think we got to bail. And man, this was such a major subject. I don't even know how to wrap this up.
I need to wrap it up though. So is the answer that you don't have a go-to place for me, literally me, to go and try to create one investing research related
use case
algorithm?
So I think probably there is. I mean, I don't know enough about the marketplace to be able to answer that. That said, if we add another dimension, which is time, even if there isn't right now, chances are there will be, soon enough, because these things tend to start as B2B, and we know those exist. So like AutoML platforms as B2B. Yeah. The B2C, I guess, is just a matter of time.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll tell you, Nins, what I feel like is like I felt when I was listening to Steve Jobs talk about the future of digital editing and creating your own home movies. It just seemed, it didn't seem impossible. It seemed like it's really hard to get my head around it because I don't have the experience with the idea enough to know. But I guess I could see that some point in time, we're not going to be making epic features that are going to go into the movie theater. Fine. But we will be doing TikTok. And there's some version of this that's the TikTok version that really makes us money. And I think that's coming. I actually do. I don't know what that is yet, but I suspect it's coming and we'll make money with it. So thanks for being here, man. I appreciate it so much.
Thanks for having me. It's it is interesting to get these questions in a different environment or different context from the one I'm used to, and certainly with a different target audience. Also, that's super interesting.
Very different audience.
Very different.
Sure. Thanks, man.
Any last points you want to make, Nuno, before we sign off?
No, I mean it's certainly a fascinating area, and I if anyone's curious about it, it's definitely worth some time investment into looking into the types of problems AI can help with. I think that's a good starting point. What is that the technology can help me solve, and then creatively thinking about their own situation, their own context, their own pain points, and how is it I could solve this in a quant and ML enabled way.
Yeah. It always helps to have a son-in-law who's a genius. So I love you, man. I really do.
You have another one? Oh, you do have another one, actually.
yeah, I do. And maybe I can prevail upon you, or Danielle can, to maybe put a list of things together that we should go be looking at that would help us with what you just said. That would be awesome. And we'll get that up on the website, huh, Danielle?
Yeah, a few references, yeah.
Well, I've been asking for a while now, so I'm not promising anything. Okay. But I'll do my absolute best.
Don't make me come to Switzerland.
She has leverage.
Looking around.
She has leverage, so I guess
I don't know. It took me like 2 months to get you on the podcast after we first started talking about this.
Use the leverage, Danielle. Get this done. All right, you guys. Until next time.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Hi guys, thanks for listening to InvestED. If you enjoyed this episode and you want more information or to listen to additional episodes, visit our website at investedpodcast.com and sign up for my virtual workshop right there. Spots are definitely limited for this event. I'm not kidding. They really are. They sell out very quickly. So everything discussed on this podcast, by the way, is either my opinion or it's Danielle's opinion. And really important, it's not to be taken as investing advice because I am not your financial advisor, nor have I considered your personal situation as your fiduciary. So remember that. You're on your own here. This podcast is for your entertainment and education only, and I really hope you enjoyed it.